Hey Mackenzie, what did the second hand say to the hour hand as it passed by?
What?
See you in a minute.
Hey everybody, what is up? My name is Mackenzie.
And I'm Jonathan.
We are husband and wife, and together we are Paradise Games.
And today we're going to be reviewing Stonemaier Games' Pendulum, designed by Travis Jones, with art by Robert Leask.
Now this game is a brand new release and we have been playing it all week long. And we are excited to share our thoughts with you, playing 1 to 2 players.
Great, so we've got for you a pretty positive review, and we're going to talk about the things we liked and the things we maybe would change.
In Pendulum, each player is a powerful noble, vying to succeed the timeless king and become the true ruler of Dunya.
It's an uncommon game in that it's a real-time game, so there's no turns. It's a worker placement game where you're placing workers, and there's sand timers that denote how long those workers have to stay at those sand timers before you can take them away. The goal is to achieve victory points and move these several tracks up until you are within the parchment paper, which writes you as the timeless king. I would recommend this game to anyone who has analysis paralysis, who has trouble making decisions. When the weight's on them, everyone's like, come on, it's your turn. And you want to get better at that. If you want to get better, this is a good game for that. It's because the actions are relatively simple. Everything is very simple. It's like, I get 2 gold, I spend 2 gold. But in the grand scheme of things, you're trying to plan a few rounds ahead. So if you're the kind of person who really struggles to be like, oh, I have to make the perfect move, this forces you to make that move in that 45 seconds before the timer flips, which I think is a really good thing.
After playing this game multiple times, you will get faster and faster. I wouldn't recommend this game to people that don't do well under pressure. If you're super competitive and you're liable to like freak out with the timers flipping, or if you're playing with someone like me, who, when I understood the rules of the game finally, every time the timers would get close to finishing, I was like, flip, 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 and Jonathan was like, ah, ah, ah. But I think that just like added to the fun of the game. So if you want to take the time to learn the rules and play this game a couple of times without the timers, I think anybody could play this game, because after you play it enough with the timers, I had plenty of time to make a decision.
Yeah, I would say this game is not for people who are never going to play with the same people twice, or they're not going to be able to get through 2 rounds, because you really have to play untimed that first time you play with people, or else you're really not sure that anyone knows what's going on. So it's really for like those groups that you get together with regularly or with family.
Yeah, I wouldn't bring this out at like a random board game night, especially if people aren't used to playing a ton of board games. A real-time strategy game, I think, is going to be difficult to jump into, but for seasoned players, I think you'll really enjoy it. Now, I think it should be noted, this was our very first real-time strategy game. And I have to say, I was pretty nervous when Jonathan said he wanted this game, because I was like, real-time? Like, I have to try and compete with Jonathan at the same time? This game actually turned out to be my cup of tea.
Okay, so Mackenzie, how did you feel about our first untimed game?
Well, I came in a little nervous. Jonathan's like, don't worry, the first time it's going to be like your turn, my turn, your turn, there's no time. I thought the game was actually very well functioning. Like, once I understood the basic rules and we had time to sort through, okay, what exactly is going on, I was able to ask all those basic questions that I needed to clarify the rules, which is what I feel like a lot of people struggle with this game, is saying, how will I know if this other person is doing the rules correctly? When I'm over here doing my own strategy at the same time, which is what you do with the timers. And I think that's just playing it a lot and making sure both people understand. And there's going to be mistakes, and it's just kind of like who makes the least amount of mistakes.
I think we were probably making like minor mistakes the first 3 or 4 games. I would say the thing like to remember, the black zone, you can place any meeples there.
Oh, yeah.
So like just because somebody gets to the gold space before you doesn't mean you can't go there, and that was like a big rule we forgot the first time.
Yeah, we were making it extra hard on ourselves.
I think what was nice about the untimed game is it still gives you the feel of a timed game. You're still flipping the timers and they're locking the zones, and it's like you flip the purple and then you flip the black a couple times and the green, and then you're back to the purple, which made it feel like a timed game, just like at a much slower pace. And I actually found that we were probably moving slower sometimes in the timed game for 2 players.
I don't know. I didn't find the time timing issue a problem.
The more we got into the timed games, though, we started to introduce more actions, and you can really start to chain things together. And even though my workers were locked up, I was playing lots of cards and doing other stuff, so that filled the time back up. But it's really just sort of like a flow that's nice the first couple of times you play.
Mm-hmm. Overall, I feel like the balance is good for new players. But I do feel, which they address this in the book, I do feel that if someone has played the game a lot more, they are going to far do better, and I think they have a far better advantage, which with a lot of games, I think you're going to have a far better advantage to win. I or Jonathan would start to get behind in the game, and I feel like the game was punishing me. If you lost 2 rounds, like, good luck. Like, I felt like there was no really a catch-up mechanic built into the game.
Yeah, the theme is politics, and there's this idea that if you were in first, if you got the most votes, you had the privilege. So you would get to have first say over where you put your workers. If you're both going for the same spot, you could say, nope, that's mine because I have privilege. It also meant that you got more cards and more victory points. So the more points you had, the more points you got, which could really put you ahead.
Which I think is a really cool, like, theme. It was like true life. Like, if you are a more popular politician, you're going to do better. You're going to be close to the timeless king. That's cool how that played out in the game, but in the game, do you want to play it like where if you're starting to lose, like,
and there is a little thing in there, so if you have the same number of votes, the person who's lower on the privilege track moves up. So there's like a little underdog, but like I still felt it was more likely that one player would get a lot more votes than the other.
But in addition to the front side, there is also an advanced side to the game. And Jonathan, why don't you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so on the back side of the playmat, there is an advanced player mode, which introduces a few mechanics. If you're all advanced, it gives you this like glory track where you can start putting cubes backwards once you've reached the end of the track if everyone's sort of maxing out. What it does is it introduces like a few more like micro transaction type things. You have to spend victory points to get another worker, where the other folks just have to spend cubes. So it can like help keep you back when you're trying to get to the front as an advance.
If you're playing with people that are new to the game and you've played the game lots of times, then you should jump over to that advanced side to help balance out the game. I feel like it would be rather chaotic to play this with more than 2. I'm sure people do it and it works. I just can't see it as like how everyone's arms would fit around the table to move everything at the same time.
Right, and for a couple of the games, I tried to play on the back side of the board, so I was looking upside down, and it was a little hard. It was a little hard to move my meeples down and like figure out what I was doing, so I'd imagine that player is like having a tough time, and it's probably someone who's played it before.
Okay, so next we are going to talk about the components, and all I have to say is wobble baby, wobble baby, wobble baby, wobble. All right, why don't you elaborate a little bit more on that?
Okay, so the first thing I want to say is the positive. So the components for this game, when I first saw them, I was like, all right, action cubes, we're doing the whole pandemic thing. So I thought like we were gonna get like, you know, these colored generic action cubes, and I thought, you know, hey, why wasn't that like, why weren't the gold coins, or why wasn't, you know, the power like a star or something? Once I played the game, totally understand. It makes complete sense why the components are what they are. When you're working at real time and you have 45 seconds, it is way better, like way easier to do math with like 5 red cubes than like 5 other shaped things. So it's really for like the math, for like sliding. So I totally get the cubes. That like makes total sense.
And also just for mobility, you have to like drag things off and on the board so much. Like if they were too complicated, I think the little squares work really nicely.
Yeah, and plastic was a good choice here because they slip really easily and they just kind of like go off. Talking about the rest of the components, there's like some funky stuff going on. The weirdest things, like with the meeples being made of plastic, they have a seam around them. So they can't really like stand up. Like the big meeples, they wobble a lot. That's like why we're talking wobble. You know what else wobbles? The player mats. The player mats wobble. So we got these like real thin player mats. It's the same texture as the extra achievement in Wingspan, which I liked that, but for this, I really felt like cardboard probably would have been the better choice here. I think probably the worst part about why it was the flimsy was that when you tried to move your victory point marker, sometimes it would like get caught on the rough texture and your whole board would spin and your like things would go flying, or like you bump the table and like all of your plastic pieces like slide down and you don't remember where your victory points were. We did, however, notice, Mackenzie, what did you find out?
Okay, so what I noticed after playing a couple times, there is a little seal at the quote-unquote bottom of the cube, and if it is laying on the mat, it goes And I was like, why is this not moving? But some of mine would move and it'd go, you know, it just like flip that thing over, it will glide right across. Or if you're finding they're flying off, you know, flip it back over to the rough side and it'll just go all through the game, but they will stay on the board.
Let's talk about the elephant in the room, the timers. I will say, if you have any issues with any of your components in a Stonemaier Games game, they're like famous for replacing parts. So if you go to their site, they've got a whole parts replacement form. They're very willing to replace anything. They want you to have a totally functioning game. When we first got Pendulum, our timers were like a bit of an issue. So both of our purple and our green timer were getting stuck. They did say that there was an issue with some of the timers and that it was mostly fixed, but if you did run into an issue, just like keep flipping it and it will break up over time. And I do have to say, after like 200 times, they finally broke up and they're not having issues anymore. So our timers are totally good.
Yeah.
But it was a bit frustrating the first couple of games.
And I want to say, like they said, like just flip it a couple times and it'll be fine. He's not exaggerating with 200. He was like sitting at his work desk today. I watched him just flipping the timers back and forth and timing them. And during a meeting, just flip, 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 trying to, dedication to you guys, dedication. And it had to be about 200 times before the sand was running correctly. It runs correctly now.
Yeah, and I do have to say now, our black timer is running in at about 43.5 seconds. The green timer is a perfect 2 minutes. It runs 2 minutes on the dot every time. The purple timer, in one direction, it's 2:51. In the other direction, it's 2:43. So which is about 20 seconds fast. Which is not a major deal, but when somebody's flipping those timers as fast as they can, that's like a couple minutes gone from your game.
What I found confusing was there was a red track where I could go to specifically the red track and I will be able to move up my red track. But then at the bottom of the board, there was also the red symbol with a brown hexagon. But the brown hexagon threw me off because I just assumed, because it looked similar to the other borders, that when I went to the red, that also counted down there. But it was when I went to the brown question mark, but the question mark was associated with, I could move up, by going to that brown question mark, I could move up my red token up on my victory board. So Jonathan was investigating it for me and came across a little discovery.
Yeah, so the question mark really states that it's anything that you earn in that province. And it's all of your like little provinces that are under the brown actions or the blue actions or the yellow actions. If you're having trouble seeing and telling the difference between them, there's actually a little dot in the corner they pointed out, which you can see there's in the top left, top right, these dots that tell you which color octagon it is. However, it looks like on the board, the yellow and the brown, the dots are actually swapped. So it looks like there's a bit of a misprint there. We've let Stonemaier Games know. I'm sure they're going to fix it for the next print. So let's talk about the Automa for Pendulum. I actually had a lot of fun with it. It was really fun. And I've played the Scythe Automa before, which I also enjoyed. So I know that they do a great job with designing these and balancing them. Here's what I really liked about the Automa. There are 2 triggers. So anytime that you flip a black or a green timer when the purple timer is finished, or anytime you remove a worker from a space where it has completed an action, you trigger an Automa card. So what happens is the Automa flips a card, you look at the card, and it's got some type of actions that occur on it. It may flip a timer if it's able to, it may move some meeples if it's able to. That really can mess you up, because if you're about to move from this spot to a spot over there, you pick up your meeple, you flip the thing, and all of a sudden they've locked the timer or they've moved a meeple into the space. So it simulates that real time where players are going, ha, take that, and they're moving in. And so they use extra meeples for the other 2 players, so there's really like 6 meeples. So they cover like almost all the spots except for 1. At the end of each round, there is a number of votes that they get, a number of victory points that they get, and then a set of stratagem cards that they're going to take if they're available in an order, which I thought was a really clever way to do that. It sort of simulates other players getting ahead of you, taking cards, which is a great way to incentivize you to actually do well with like getting your votes. Depending on the level of the Automa that you play against, there's going to be some handicaps, so they may get a few less votes or a few less victory points, which helps even out the playing field but lets you still use that same deck every time. I definitely am going to play it again in the future. It was a lot of fun.
Alright everyone, and that is our review of Pendulum. If you like what you saw, please like and subscribe, and we'd love to come back and do another video for you. Right, Emma? High five! Good girl, Emma! See you later!